Let me ask you this. Did your father leave you when you were a child because he quote-unquote quickly wanted to get a pack of cigarettes? Have you been looking for a new father figure ever since that day? Or are you maybe looking for someone to dominate you completely and entirely? Perhaps you're also looking for a really good DPS character in a game called Genshin Impact? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, then Arlecchino is definitely the character for you. What's up guys, it's Vaporize. Today I have a video for you that I have been excited about for a very long time. Arlecchino is finally out in the game and she got introduced to us older Genshin players almost 2 years ago. But now she is finally playable, and in today's video I will go through everything you need to know when it comes to the 4th Vaporize Harbinger, or more secretly known as Pyro. I will talk about her kit, her artifacts, her weapons, team composition and more. As such, without further ado, let us get started. Starting off with her kit, the usual approach I have in my guides is to simply talk about one ability after the other, but for Arlecchino I will change this approach. Instead, I will explain to you how all of her abilities come together so that you can play her at her maximum potential. For Arlecchino, aspects like rotation and character rotations are very important. But the most important aspect when it comes to Arlecchino is her main mechanic called Bond of Life. Bond of Life in itself is not a new mechanic. MiHoYo introduced it in patch 4.0 and it is basically a negative shield on your character which you need to heal away in order to get various buffs. In the case of Arlecchino though, we don't want to heal it away. That is because whenever Bond of Life is active on her, her normal attacks will do more damage. Which basically means that Arlecchino is a normal attack based character. In fact, her normal attacks are so strong that using her elemental burst results in a flat damage loss. We will talk about that later on, as there is a very specific reason as to why that is. But for now, keep that in mind. The biggest question you should have right now is, okay, how does she gain a Bond of Life? And the answer to that question can be found in a debuff called Blood Depth Directive. Blood Depth Directive will be applied to your opponents whenever they get hit by your elemental skill All is Ash. And if you use your charge attack on an opponent who has Blood Depth Directive on him, you will absorb that debuff and turn it into a Bond of Life on Arlecchino. I will show you the whole process on the screen right now so that you understand it in more detail. Once you gain a Bond of Life, all your normal attacks will now be converted into Pyro attacks and they will do more damage based on your attack and your current Bond of Life. Every single time you use an attack while Bond of Life is active, you will now reduce your Bond of Life by 7.5%, which results in the fact that Arlecchino is a very front-loaded DPS character. And that is the very basic core of her gameplay loop. Use your elemental skill to apply Blood Depth Directive to your opponents, absorb it by using your charge attack in order to get a Bond of Life and then profit. However, there are a few aspects that are crucial when it comes to unlocking her full potential. Those aspects are the reason as to why you see those insane damage showcases where every single normal attack does 100,000 plus damage, or in my case even 200k. The reason can be found in one of her passive abilities. Agony alone may be repaid functions in a very simple way. If you kill an opponent who has Blood Depth Directive on him, you will gain a Bond of Life at 130% of her max HP. This is a gigantic increase compared to the normal Bond of Life you get from using your charge attack, which in itself has a 65% max HP value. As such, it is more effective to take out low HP enemies, like Helios for example, in order to get a stronger Bond of Life. But what happens when you are fighting against the boss? Well, don't worry, MiHoYo has you covered. When Blood Depth Directive is active for more than 5 seconds, it will turn into a stronger version of itself. And if you absorb that stronger version by using your charge attack, you will also gain a 130% Bond of Life. This basically dictates your boss rotation, and the easiest way to show you what I mean is by showing that rotation in action. Alright, so what I did here is very simple. You start the fight by using your elemental skill on Arlecchino, and that will apply Blood Depth Directive to your opponent. Then we will go through all our characters and use their elemental bursts in order to set up our nuke. This whole rotation will take more than 5 seconds, which will turn our Blood Depth Directive into the stronger version of itself. And once you're done with your rotation, we will use Arlecchino's charge attack, gain a Bond of Life, and start to nuke our opponents. One aspect to point out here is that the maximum value for Bond of Life is 200% of your max HP, but you can only get up to 145% of her max HP by a single elemental skill. So you need to use your elemental skill twice if you want to have the maximum Bond of Life. Due to the fact that the skill itself has an outrageous cooldown of 30 seconds, you can see that it becomes quite difficult to get to a 200% Bond of Life. Thankfully enough, her elemental burst can reset the cooldown of your skill, and she can also reduce the cooldown by consuming her own Bond of Life when she's attacking by 0.8 seconds. With that, we have talked about most of the important elements for Arlecchino. However, there's one aspect left, and that aspect will change everything when it comes to how you approach the game. Her passive talent, the Bale Moon Alone May Know, will give Pyro a massive DPS increase, 40% more pyro damage to be precise, but in turn she cannot be healed by anyone outside of herself. Fortunately, this is where your elemental burst comes into play. When using Bale Moon Rising, Arlecchino will absorb all nearby Blood Depth directives, and she will then heal herself based on your Bond of Life. However, this will use up your entire Bond of Life, and because of that, her elemental burst is more of an emergency button than a DPS ability. Alright, before we move on to our last passive trace, I quickly want to talk about something that might be interesting to everyone who wants to min-max her or everyone who likes math, and that is the damage calculation behind her normal attack. If we take a look at her normal attack, you can see that we have the same damage modifier that we usually have for our normal attacks, but we also have the Mask of Red Death state. This state is basically whenever your Bond of Life is active and you are infused with extra pyro damage. It will give you a massive 205% increase to your normal attacks, and on top of that, we also have the modifier we get from our Bond of Life itself. It is calculated by multiplying your attack with a certain percentage of your Bond of Life. All of this together will result in a massive damage increase to your normal attacks. If we take a look at this small sheet here, which I kinda yoinked from I Win to Lose, so huge props to him for this amazing sheet, you can see that our overall multiplier will go down as we keep using our normal attacks. In my opinion, there are two interesting aspects to point out here. The first one is your fourth normal attack. This one is a two-part attack combined into one, and as such it has a whopping 600% increase. The other aspect is all the way down at the end. Once your Bond of Life falls below 30% of your max HP, you will lose your Pyro infusion. This is basically the point where you would restart your rotation, if not earlier. If you want to super giga hyper min-max her, you could even argue that you restart your normal attack chain after the fourth attack. It will give you a damage increase, however it is not a must-do. Lastly, we have her third passive ability, which will give you some survivability based on your attack. And if you have paid attention, then you should have noticed that every single passive ability is combat related. So in the case of Arlecchino, we do not have an exploration ability. And that is basically her entire kit. It is fairly detailed and complex, but once you get the idea behind it, it is a lot of fun to use. And I hope that by the way I explained it, you now understand her kit. If you have any other questions regarding her abilities, feel free to drop them down below in the comments. Either way, let us now move on to a much easier section of the guide, which are the artifacts, weapons, and finally, after that, team composition. Alright, when it comes to your weapons and artifacts, the most important aspect to keep in mind is what type of stats she wants to have. Arlecchino is a fairly simple to build character. She wants to have as much attack as you can get, while also going for crit rate and crit damage. If you're going for an elemental reaction based composition like Overload or Vaporize, for example, you can also opt for some elemental mastery. Between 200 and 300 is a good benchmark to go for. That is kinda all you need to know when it comes to her stats. As such, what you're looking for on her sense is going to be attack or elemental mastery. pyro damage or attack on her goblet, and crit rate or crit damage on her circlet. Let us quickly take a look at my Arlecchino so that you have an example. You might have noticed that I barely have any energy recharge, if any at all, and yeah, you kinda don't need it on Arlecchino. Her elemental burst is an emergency button. When it comes to artifact sets, in my opinion most of the sets in the game kinda fall flat when it comes to Arlecchino. Take the Marushise Hunter set for example. You need to lose HP in order to make full use of the 4-piece bonus, but Arlecchino can't be healed, right? So not really that good. Because of that, there are only a handful of sets you can actually use on her. You can go for a 2-piece combination of various sets, like Marushise Hunter and Gladiator, or Shimenava and the Crimson Witch, or you can go for a 4-piece Gladiator set, which is absolutely perfect for Arlecchino. Another set you can use is the Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy. It will give you attack and up to 54% damage bonus whenever your Bond of Life changes. This is technically Arlecchino's best in slot set, but it is new, so you might not have it. One artifact set, which I want to talk about specifically, is our Shimenava set. The 2-piece bonus is completely fine, but the 4-piece bonus is a trap. That is mainly due to 2 reasons. First of all, you need to use your elemental skill in order to activate it. With a cooldown of 30 seconds, this is already troublesome to begin with. However, even when activating it, the 50% increase to your normal attacks is only active for 10 seconds. Remember when we talked about her rotation? You use your elemental skill first before you go through all of your other characters because you want your Blood Depth Directive to turn into the stronger version. Well, due to that, we are effectively only looking at a 5-second window at most, where you can use the 50% increase to your normal attacks. Because of that, in my opinion, the Shimenava 4-piece is not a good set for Arlecchino. If you're going for a Melt, Vape or Overload composition, you can also use Elemental Mastery sets like the Gilded Dream set, but honestly I would just go for the Gladiator set. It is really good and can be used in any type of composition you're going to use on her. Which brings us to our weapons, and once again the same logic applies. Attack, crit rate and crit damage. Those are the stats you're looking for. If you're free to play, you can choose the White Tassel or Missive Wind Spear. Missive Wind Spear came from one of the recent events, and White Tassel can be found by either opening chests in Lyre or by wishing on the standard banner. When it comes to 4-star options, you can choose from our Battle Pass weapons, with both of them being decently good on Arlecchino. Or you can go for a Lithic Spear or Dragon's Bane. Both of them come from our banners, but Dragon's Bane is especially good in Vaporize teams. If you want to craft a weapon, then the only weapon that really comes to mind is the Prototype Star Glitter, but it pales in comparison to the weapons I mentioned so far and the ones I'm going to mention now. Moving on to our 5-star weapons, the most obvious choice is her signature weapon. Not only is it stylish AF, but it is also perfect for Arlecchino. In a basic nutshell, it will give you crit rate, attack, a Bond of Life and a massive damage bonus. This one is insane. If you have it, use it. When it comes to other 5-star weapons, you can use the Primordial Jade Ringed Spear, Staff of Homer or the Staff of the Scarlet Sands. All of them are fairly close to each other as they will give you really good stats. If you have the other 5-star weapons like Calamity Queller and Skyward Spine, then keep in mind that you will mainly use those as attack stat sticks and they only slightly outperform our 4-star options. Especially if you're using Bandit in your team, because then diminishing returns regarding attack become a problem. And that is kinda all there is regarding weapons and artifacts. So as a quick TLDR, use various 2-piece combinations or a 4-piece Gladiator and 4-piece Shimenava set. If you want to farm the new artifact set, then go ahead as it is technically her best in slot set. Regarding weapons, use her signature weapon, Staff of Homer or the Jade Ringed Spear. When it comes to 4-star weapons, you can use any of the ones I mentioned before, all of them work. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And also for all us nerds out there, here's a small list with all of the weapons I mentioned so far, as well as a few more, and you can see that White Tassel as a baseline is actually very good. The composition I used was Arlecchino, Yelan, Bennett and Kazuha, so basically a vape team, and yeah, White Tassel keeps up with most of the weapons. The only weapons that kinda outperform it are either the Staff of Scarlet Sands or her signature weapon Crimson Moon's Semblance. Everything else, especially the weapons that are below White Tassel, like Dragon's Bane or Missive Windspear for example, are outperformed by a 3-star weapon. So if you have it, it's actually really good. Arlecchino follows the same principle as most other DPS units in the game, with the only difference being that she cannot be healed. As such, there's no shame in using shielders like Layla or Zhongli, but if you like to play risky, which I like to do, then skipping them altogether for better support characters is a good move. There are a lot of compositions you can go for, like a mono Pyro team or a Vaporize and Overload team, and because of that I will show you my own favorite compositions for Arlecchino. The first one is a very simple mono Pyro team. We use Arlecchino as our main DPS, Bennett as our support buffer and Jungling as our second support. Kazuha will fill in the role of our resistance shred as he will be using the Viridescent Venera set. Obviously, the more constellations you have on Bennett and Jungling, the better this composition becomes. If you don't have Kazuha, you can also use Sucrose. The next composition is the one you have seen throughout the video quite often, which is my Vaporize team. We use Yelan for our Hydro application, which in turn will allow us to use Vaporize. And after that we use Kazuha for some elemental damage bonus and resistance shred, and Bennett for a huge attack buff. This composition does benefit from having some elemental mastery on Arlecchino, and once again the build you saw earlier is from this composition. If you don't have Yelan, you can also use Xingqiu. The only Hydro character I wouldn't advise to use is Furina due to how her kit works. She consumes HP and we don't want to have that on Arlecchino. Which brings us to our last composition, which is going to be an Overload team. Usually you would see a Chevreuse here, but I don't have her, so I can't show you Chevreuse. Feels bad, I guess. But if you have her, pair her up with Arlecchino, Bennett and an Electro character like Yaemiko, Fischl or Beidou. If you don't have her, we basically do the same as with our Vaporize composition. But in this case we take out Yelan and we use characters like Yae, Beidou or Fischl. However, those are just some of the compositions you can use on her. You can also go for a Meld or Virgin composition, and in the end it is entirely up to you. Let me know in the comments what your favorite composition is. And PS, Virgin is somewhat questionable due to the HP loss and the fact that her build does somewhat change. But you know, if you want to play it, go ahead and play it. Who cares, right? Either way, this brings us to the end of the guide. I hope it was helpful and I hope you like Pereira, Daddy, Mommy, Arlecchino, the Knave and whatever else she goes by as much as I do. Personally, I honestly feel like she is the best character to come out of the Fontaine patch cycle so far, and that says a lot considering that we have beasts like Neuvillette, Furina and Navia. And I can't wait to see what people are going to cook up with her, considering that her I can't get healed mechanic is very dangerous but also super rewarding. As always, I wish you all a great day or night wherever you live, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.